And welcome in another Monday. Another Top 25 is done, and it's time for another Top 25 double take. Forgive the hair. Next time you see me, there'll be a haircut. I'm your host, Dave McHugh. Welcome in. If you are already a member, you're watching us live or the archive. Thank you so much for being a Hoopsville member on buymeacoffee.com. If you are not, and you're watching this on delay, wondering, well, how can I watch this more on time or live? Well, head to buymeacoffee.com/Hoopsville or scan that QR code on the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to sign up right then and there. Become a role player or higher, and you can see this show live. And get the archive sooner than everybody else, including the podcast. Top 25 Double Take Show is a spinoff of the show that we had, or a segment we had on Hoopsville most Mondays when we had an evening show, where basically we took the top 25 from that week and we figured out what team might be flying a little too high to the sun, what team may be flying way off of the radar, what team should we just, I got questions about maybe. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm curious what everybody has as a thought. We've spun that out to its own little show. And tonight, well, we're going to do double duty because it is the final one for 3 weeks. We won't get a new top 25 until January 5th. So Ryan Scott and Riley Zayas agreed. I tip my hat to these fine gentlemen to do both the men and women. I can't wait to hear Riley's take on the men's side of things, to be honest. I might just chime in as well because this might have been the easiest top 25 I've had to do in a long time, because there were 5 games total played on my entire ballot. Joining me on the Hoopsville hotline, as previously mentioned, it is Ryan Scott and Riley Zayas. Gentlemen, welcome to mid-December. Ryan, I know it's chilly in Delaware, but dude, you seem to be literally taking... Did you not turn on the heat at the house?
Yeah, well, my family, they're actually probably can hear this now. It likes to complain that I keep it a little too cold here, but
you might be proving that.
Also promoting the blood bank of Delaware here. Make sure you donate blood when you have the chance to do that. So.
Wonderfully done, sir. Well, we appreciate the actual literal proof that it might be too cold in your house and that your wife and family might be right. Riley, in the meantime, I don't think it's too chilly down where you are. You seem to be rather comfy.
Yeah, it's not cold at all down here, Dave. I mean, we just got to 40 yesterday, and everyone was acting like we were in for a major winter storm. So we are definitely a little bit in a different spot than Ryan is up there on the East Coast.
Listen, I'll just be blunt. I'll say this. You could have been in D.C. with me last night where the wind chill was near 0. So I'll take your 40, sir, and show you what real cold is.
Exactly. No, I spent plenty of time up in the north last year, Dave, and glad I'm here in Texas at this time of year.
Yeah. You guys have it easy. Quick note, Greg Sager just pointed out, North Park beat Greenville tonight, 138-117. Vikings set an NPU record, team record for most points, most made field goals, most assists. Old team points stood for 39 years. I know it's not top 25 related, but caught my attention. All right, so we are going to talk top 25. We're not going to change the order because Riley's with us. We're going to keep this as it is. We're going to go men first and then women. As I said, can't wait to hear what Riley has to think about some of these. We do the dubious, deep dive, and debatable. And I know from watching your guys' conversations, some of these might get tricky to start figuring out. We might run out of teams. I have a feeling by the time we get into January, there'll be plenty of teams that will reveal themselves to have a conversation about. New top 25 is out on the men's side. And for the most part, not a lot of changes. Mount Union jumped up with their win over Muskegum. Montclair slid a spot as a result of that. So did a handful of other teams. St. Thomas moved up a few more spots. Only team that fell out was Illinois Wesleyan. They've lost 3 or 4, and you could argue with an overtime win over Carthage, it could have been 4 straight losses. And Maryville entered the poll just with 46 points, though, interestingly enough. That means, not surprisingly, not everybody's voting for him. If everybody was voting for him, they'd be all in the 24th spot. All right, so there's my ramble for now. When we get to women, I can't wait to point out that there is more women's teams being voted for than on the men's side, and that's happened for a few weeks now, and I don't know the last time that happened. But Riley, we'll start with you because I'm curious. Just quick, your thought. It was a light week of games. Again, I had 5 total games on my top 25 that were played. That makes it easy sometimes, but also you can't move teams in either to a poll. So what do you think of the men's side of things right now?
Yeah, Dave, it really feels like there's a lot of gearing up towards these next 2 weeks, right? Where we really have a lot of teams who, played especially in this top 25 that we have right now, played a pretty strong non-conference slate to start things off. Then have kind of gone to a little bit of a dip, with exams and those kinds of things around this time of year, as we always get. But now everyone's starting to gear themselves back up towards what's going to be a huge stretch. A lot of teams, a lot of ranked matchups coming up over the next 14 days or so. And that's certainly going to play a big role in the way that this poll continues to play out. As for this last week, I think you said it right there. There was some really interesting games that unfolded, but not a ton maybe that would have changed a lot of our views on these teams that are currently ranked. Just based on the fact that, again, when you have a smaller quantity of games, there's a little bit of a smaller sample size to pull from. But I did think, we did see some movement amongst teams that were maybe just on the fringe or just outside of the top 25 that played some games, had some impactful results, especially this past weekend, which was interesting to take a look at.
Well said. Ryan, did you enjoy the fact that there weren't too much carnage, that you could have a relatively easy week with your poll?
Yeah, and the other part of that, as Riley mentioned, is having some big games coming up. There was a number of teams that you get down to the end of the resume and you go, well, I think they're probably good. And then you look at see what the next game is and you go, oh, they're playing a top 25 team next week. I'll just wait.
Yeah.
Right. And it makes you feel a little easier about saying, well, I'll let them play their way either in or out, depending on how these next games go. And there's a whole bunch of those coming up over the next couple of weeks where some really good teams are playing each other.
Yep.
And we're going to learn a lot. Although also, if you're playing in Florida over Christmas, I don't know how much we count the quality of that to be determinative for the rest of the year, but
well, then
it will be helpful. We'll get those matchups.
Yeah. The other risk of it too is like, oh, okay, they got the win. All right. I can't wait to vote for them in 2.5 weeks. And then you sit there hoping they don't botch something along the way to make you go right back to questioning everything you thought about them in the first place. All right, let's go to let's keep the order going. I'm not going to change this up till January. I think we'll have some more fun with this in January in terms of throwing some curveballs and the like. So we'll go in order. We'll start with Dubious. This is a team that maybe is a top 25 team. We're not saying maybe it's not. Maybe we are, but sometimes it just might be a team that we think is just too high. Ryan, I'll start with you on Dubious. We won't throw Riley into the fire with this one just yet. We'll let him get the second one, but what's your Dubious pick of the week?
So the one I picked out, and again, like we're really picking nits at this point, like it shouldn't be a negative on these teams, but the one I picked out was Johns Hopkins, is in the poll and not a team that I'm voting for yet, and actually don't have, I won't say don't have them close, but probably in a tier below the teams that I'm considering to be in the poll right now. They're 6-1. They're a good team. You watch them play. It's a Ryan Kane team. They're pretty fundamentally sound. They're really tough. They know what they're doing. I'm not quite sure that the talent level is there yet. Maybe the execution. They've beaten the teams that you expect them to beat by a lot. They've had some close games. I think a lot of the beyond the name recognition, a lot of the record is this win over Hood that they had on the second. And Hood's getting a lot of their attention because they beat Catholic, in overtime or double overtime earlier in the year. And I'm just not quite sure any of those teams are maybe as high as they're getting voted right now.
Yeah.
I kind of have Hopkins more like on a level like DePaul, who is clearly a team you might vote for. And I think they got one vote this week. Maybe just a little bit higher. I want to see them play a few more of these tough games and maybe have some consistency in conference. Where you're going to have some teams that are a little more familiar with what they do and maybe able to stop them a little bit. I want to see them play them where on a little more than they are right now.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I'll have my thoughts a little bit more, though. We'll give Riley a chance to respond on the Dubious call.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ryan. I've watched a little bit of Hopkins this year. I think the coaching is always going to be there with a team like this, and the name recognition, certainly. A lot of people tend to maybe give the benefit of the doubt when you're looking at a team that maybe not the eye test isn't the best, right, that you've seen, but generally what you're going to get out of a team like this. But I think certainly at this point of the year, it's, there are maybe some question marks to be still answered by that team, even as they continue to progress, especially into conference play coming up in January, which will be interesting to see how they handle that part of the schedule.
Yeah, I'm not sold yet. They keep showing up in our data, obviously, and I just move on. I'm not voting for Hood either. I think there's a lot of teams in this old Mid-Atlantic region that need a little more seasoning, as it were, before I'm ready to jump. I'm also the Centennial Conference. I think it's gonna be very competitive, but nobody's jumping out at me. F&M's kind of I don't want to say they're overrated by any way stretch. They're inconsistent.
Yeah.
Gettysburg's really not having the season. Granted, new head coach, but they're not having the season I was expecting either. So I'm on pause on Hopkins as well. But they've got, as we noted, they're going to have some good tests ahead of them to give us a sense of how they're playing. I'm a little surprised at where they are as well. Riley, who would your dubious choice be?
Yeah, as Ryan said, at this point, I think we're kind of maybe nitpicking just a little bit with some of these teams as far as who we see, as maybe not quite meeting expectations. But one team that I have watched a decent amount, Hampton-Sydney, has been a team that I think has at stretches shown that they can be very, very good. We knew that they were going to look a little different this year with some of the players that they did graduate from last year's squad. But the one thing that kind of watching them play, I mean, 5-2, the Randolph-Macon result, when you look at that and watch that game, again, it's Randolph-Macon, right? We know what Josh Merkel's squad is doing this year. We know how good they are. At the same time, you would like to see Hampton-Sydney, a team that right now is 16th in the poll, keep that game a little closer. But then more importantly, I think for me, it was the turnaround in that Eastern Mennonite game to come back, which I know was a couple weeks ago, so maybe a little bit more distant in some of our minds. But, they didn't quite make a bounce back sort of statement that you'd like to see after taking a loss like the Randolph-Macon one a couple days before. And then on top of that, just when you start to look at some of the underlying metrics, and efficiency is something I always look to, certainly when kind of evaluating and trying to compare teams. And the D3 DataCast efficiency right now, I think they're down to about 39, which is a step below, again, kind of what you would want to see out of a team at this point in the year that is 16th in the poll. And I would still probably have them in if I was a voter, but probably a little bit further down my ballot, just until maybe we start to see a little bit more consistency out of this group. Because again, they have the Keene State win. They have played really well at stretches, but more recently, maybe there's a few more question marks in there, even if they've navigated a relatively tough schedule.
Ryan, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some sense they're almost being penalized by how well they did that first weekend. They have all these young guards. Merkel mentioned it when he was talking to you earlier today. And not having the experience, especially in a place like the ODAC, you can really get some of those lopsided results like you saw with Macon. But those young guards played so well that first weekend. Everyone, jacked up the expectations, moved them into the top 10, which is pretty unfair. But at that point, they're the only teams that had accomplished much of anything. So
Yeah.
There was a reason to do that. But, they're going to have to learn and prove their way through. A couple of these games this weekend, I think I told somebody like, well, it looks like a team without a point guard because they graduated their All-American point guard last year, right? And they have to figure out who's running the show and who's got the ball. And it's super talented, good coaching. I'm sure they'll figure it out and come around, but they're definitely higher than they probably should be at this point. But man, what do they got? They got Redlands and Maryville and Emory all before New Year's. So I think they'll have plenty of chances to let us know what they've got going on.
Oh, absolutely. Actually kind of looking forward to it, to be honest. The only thing I would say is, yeah, Merkel certainly talked about them quite a bit. They're part of that group that's all too high, right? Like there's a whole mess of teams we talked about on last week's show that just have risen because there's just a bit of a gap. There's the really good right now, and then there's everybody else who's pretty good themselves. They're just not at that level, and you got to fill in the hole. So I think to some degree that's where a lot of that has happened. I mean, Jesus, I know as a voter, there's times I look at them and go, no, I don't want them here. I got no choice. So I think you raise a good point, but again, great opportunities coming up, Riley. You're a young guard. You're going to learn fast about Division III here in the next couple of weeks.
No doubt. Yeah, that's a very, very tough stretch coming up. But again, like you said, a great opportunity for a team to really prove themselves, right? Especially before ODAC play gets going again.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I think it's going to be some good hoops. And listen, even if they lose 1, 2, or God forbid all of them, it's a learning opportunity they can use at the end of the year. And that's, if they can turn it into that, they're going to be worthy of a top 25 vote at some point in time. Even if they struggle here in the next bit. I don't think they'll lose 3, don't get me wrong. Anyway. All right. Deep dive time, Riley. We'll let you have this one. This one's a little nicer. You're trying to boost a team up. Who do you think's flying a little too low?
Yeah, well, we're actually talking about a little bit off air, but Laura's obviously playing right now. Their team did not, receive the, top 25 votes this past week, but I really think they're starting to put together a resume that is worthy of mention, right? 7-1, 3-0 in the ARC. Even more importantly, I think it was that win over Dubuque that really stood out to me when it came about a couple weeks ago, because again, I think for a lot of us who looked at that league going into the year, Dubuque certainly seemed to be the team that everyone was going to be chasing, and for Loris to step up and get a win by double digits says a lot about what they're capable of, especially when we're looking at this, happening in early December, right? We still got a couple months to go, more time for a team like this to come along and improve. I think that's a team that's going to start to receive more and more top 35 attention if they can start to continue to string together some of these results, right? Because again, there's still a part of that where you're not really sure, exactly what you're going to get out of them. But again, I think watching them a couple times, they play with some tempo when they want to. They can move the ball. They have balance offensively. They have a lot of those traits that you'd like to see out of a team that can make some noise in the tournament in March, and certainly be very, very competitive in a good league out there in the Midwest.
Yeah, Ryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as I was going through the ballots early on, Dubuque was getting a lot of attention, and I kind of had Loris ahead of them in terms of ARC, standings. Then obviously they had the head-to-head and won pretty easily in that game. I'm not voting for them yet. Just the strength of schedule has not been super strong, and they dropped that one at the beginning to DePaul. If they were undefeated right now, that'd probably be a different story, but you want to see them play a little bit more, and especially in that conference where all the teams know each other so well.
Yeah.
And maybe overall it's not as strong as it has been recently. You want to make sure they rack up some wins in conference and don't get slipped up before you're voting for them. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I think the team to watch in that conference. So
that conference, I mean, we talked about Dubuque last week. It's always a conference that I feel like halfway through the season, I'm scratching my head going, oh, I really thought X was going to be the team, and it turns out it's Y. And by the end of the season, Z's coming along going, don't forget about me. Like, they know each other well, like all conferences do, right? But there's something about the ARC. And what I love about it, I think Nebraska Wesleyan started it, is it encouraged really, really good recruits to go to those schools and start playing basketball there. And now all of those schools, not all of them, but a good majority of them are getting solid recruits. And I think Nebraska Wesleyan certainly helped, getting them on the map, because suddenly after that, you've got 3-4 teams every year that are worth at least taking a peek at, and can play spoiler in the first weekend at least of the NCAA tournament. I'm waiting for one to get back, though, to the Final Four. We'll see when that happens. There was somebody, Nebraska. There's a connection to Nebraska Wesleyan somewhere. I got to look it up. Somebody's coach is the son or somebody of somebody that I didn't realize. Anyway, just reminded me when I thought about Nebraska Wesleyan. Sorry, random tangent. All right, deep dive for you, Ryan. Where you got your eyes?
So I always traditionally go with the team I have highest on my list that nobody's voting for, so that includes me. The one I came up with this week is actually Rochester, which is maybe like the 6th UAA team that anybody's talking about.
I've got questions.
Did get some votes. I finished my ballot and, kind of ranking everybody where I found them. And I ended up with Rochester at 24 and NYU at 25. And I didn't really want to vote for 6 UAA teams at this point. And so I did drop the 2 off. But Rochester has really intrigued me. They've played a pretty tough schedule, as they normally do, beating Cortland right at the beginning and had some big wins in there. The last 4 games have been tough and maybe not super great. Lost to Hobart, overtime with Ithaca, And then up at the UAA NESCAC Challenge, they slipped by Middlebury, lost to Bowdoin. But even in the course of all of that, I got to watch a good amount of these games, and like they've got a lot of pieces there. Everybody was telling me last year, the freshman class from last year, who are now sophomores, really, really talented, really, really strong. And I think you're seeing a little bit of growing pains of working those guys in and figuring out the roles. And I'm just intrigued, right? And I'm not voting for them right now because I want to see what UAA play looks like and, how they're going to face that gauntlet that they've got ahead of them. But really intrigued by this team and what they may be capable of if they figure it all out. And we know Luke is certainly a good enough coach to do that.
They fall in that category of teams that have had committee chairs as coaches who maybe dipped a little. And now that they've removed themselves a bit, that's coming on back. I've been intrigued, but I got a lot of questions. Riley, your take on the Yellow Jackets as one word, by the way, because I've had them on my radar for a few weeks, and I don't know what to make of these guys.
Yeah, the entire UAA feels difficult to figure out right now. I mean, after you get past just a couple of the top 2 or 3, and there's a lot of teams in the mix, as we're accustomed to, right? There's always a lot of talent in the league. Rochester certainly fits the bill as one of those teams that should absolutely be in consideration, as the top 25 is put together by the voters. The one thing that's actually stood out to me, Ryan mentioned that 4-game stretch, and I happened to be taking a look at them a couple days ago, and what stood out to me was then the second halves of each of their last 3 games, they've outscored their opponents. In the loss to Hobart, they tied Hobart in the second half. So in each of those, they've put together a much better second half than they have a first half, and I think that's an indication that if they can just figure out how to start a little bit quicker, get the offense rolling. We know they have a solid offense. I think they're right around in the top 40 in offensive efficiency right now. So if they can start to do some of the things that are working for them in the second halves of these games, where they've been able to come back, erase halftime deficits, and end up winning a couple of these, if they can figure out how to do some of that in the first half, it's going to make them a very dangerous team, especially when you get into UAA play, because the pieces are absolutely there. And so to me, that's the missing part of this right now for Rochester. The only thing that's really keeping them outside of being a legitimate top 25 team is they just haven't started fast enough in some of these key games. So that's going to be something that I'm certainly watching with them, as we move forwards.
Yeah, I find them fascinating. I never underestimate Fulkertsy. A hell of a coach. I've got more questions than I have answers about them. I don't know what to make of Rochester at 7-2. The conference is bonkers. I mean, Pat Yuckham touched on that today on the regular Hoopsville. Chicago's good. Obviously, WashU's good. Brandeis, I think, is sneaky good. Carnegie Mellon's interesting with a new head coach. You never want to discount Case. Like I said, Chicago, Emory. I mean, yeah. I don't think you can go through that. Even NYU, they have not played a world beater schedule, so I'm fascinated on what the Violets will be like. But you go 6 deep, Brian. I think you would have been crazy to put 6 teams in your top 25 from the UAA at this juncture, especially without UAA play. But I can see how you get there, right? I can see how that's logical in your mind. So Rochester is one of those that I'm fascinated. I'm looking forward to seeing how this turns into conference play, and conference play may just absolutely be. I'm trying to find a good analogy without being over the top, but might be brutal. I can't wait to watch. It's gonna be fun. All right.
We keep rooting for one of these years where everybody is 7-7, right? Maybe we get that this year. They just have an 8-way tie.
No, please, no. The tiebreaker would be insane. Oh God, the winners of the automatic bid. I can just see myself in the NCAA show now. The winners of the UAA bid is Brandeis. They finished 9-16, but we're 7-7 in conference play, and won thanks to a coin flip, a 7-way coin flip. Like, no, let's not do that. but I also kind of like your insanity. All right, let's flip over to debatable now. Riley, who you debating? This is a team that you're throwing out there. Maybe you got questions about them. Maybe you have unknowns, or you're using it as a dubious, whatever. What's your debatable?
Yeah, my debatable. I actually just wanted to get Ryan's thoughts on this. Again, I'm not a men's top 25 voter. I certainly watch a lot of men's games. I've had the chance to watch UW Eau Claire a few different times, and they're sitting right now at 10-0, and I think you can sort of look and see, at certain points with the eye test where they really stand out. Their efficiency ratings are really, really good. Their defense is really solid, especially on the perimeter. They do a lot of things the right way, but they haven't really played a schedule, I think, beyond that first couple of games against State Norbert and Carleton that really stand out. So they kind of lack that quality result. I'd be interested to see kind of, Ryan, your thoughts on UW Eau Claire, kind of how you're viewing them. At this point, they're the only 10-0 team in the poll. You can certainly make the case for them to be higher, but at the same time, similar to what we talked about with a couple other teams already tonight, you're not really sure when you haven't seen them play in some of those down to the wire, high level, top quality type matchups.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. I put them at 16 this week, which is a little higher than I'm comfortable with, but obviously an undefeated WIAC team, you can make a good case for that. The other part of this is a team that's got some real individual stars. And I think the last couple years, they've been more of an individual team than a team, right? And so there've been guys who put up big numbers and you don't want to face and are hard to scheme against, but they haven't really gotten wins when they needed them. And it seems like they're winning games this year. Now, obviously, like you said, the schedule hasn't been as tough, and we'll see if it maintains when they get into the WIAC schedule. But it feels like the Stars have kind of put some more together this year, and I'm willing to give them at least a little more. I mean, they're 10-0, right? So
right,
I'm going to give it a shot, and we'll see what happens when it gets into conference. And the other part is that I'm not sure some of the other WIAC teams are as strong as they have been, and so I think there's a real opportunity for them to really end up pretty high in the NPI just simply because of where they play and what they've got this year.
Yeah, it really feels that way. Yeah.
I've got Eau Claire on my ballot, and I have now for 2 weeks. I mentioned last week that I replaced Oshkosh with Eau Claire because I looked at Oshkosh and went, why am I voting for them when Eau Claire is undefeated, got a better resume? But I don't have them at 16. I've got them at 22. More like because I think they're good, but I've got more questions than I have answers. Yeah, no, Eau Claire's an interesting team, Riley. I think, yeah, I don't know what to make of them, to be honest.
You can really see both sides of it, right? That's why it's an interesting one that I kind of thought of for debatable, just considering the fact that you really could debate either way with them. Obviously, Dave, you have them lower than where they're ranked in the poll. Ryan has them higher. I think it just kind of shows, number one, the landscape right now, which we already all are very well aware of just not, we don't know a whole lot about some of these teams. We have a lot of questions with a lot of these teams, but at the same time, too, to Ryan's point, Eau Claire is in a really good spot this year. If this is a really good opportunity for them to make a statement, make a tournament run, if they can keep this rolling through the WIAC schedule.
I think the WIAC's going to be a fun one to watch. I like the pieces out there. I like the teams, but I don't think this is a conference that just goes chalk, as it were. Obviously that's easy to say with the WIAC because it's a conference that eats itself every season. But I think the Eau Claires of the conference, the Stevens Points of the conference this year, might be the ones that will catch more of the attention, I think, than necessarily Oshkosh or Platteville or La Crosse. I mean, La Crosse is having a terrific start to the year. A team like La Crosse might have to be better than what we expect to get out of that conference. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're going to have to play
better than they've been playing, right?
Right. All right, Riley, sorry. Ryan. It's been a long day. Ryan, you're debatable, sir.
So this is one I want to debate, not because I'm worried about them being good or not, just what we think of them at this point. So Mary Washington is up. What are they at, 5 or 6 right now? They're up to 5. They're 8-0, undefeated. They just destroyed North Carolina Wesleyan today.
Yeah.
Like they were standing still. I got to see them in person 3 games in a row, just by quirk of the schedule already. Like they're really good, and they're a bunch of weapons, the talented guards. They can jump, they rebound really well, they don't make mistakes. Team game, the kind of team that wins. At the same time, they're one of these teams that, if you look at the resume, it looked a little bit better while it was happening at the beginning than it does now, right? And so I'm wondering, in terms of the debating, have they crept up, maybe 5 or 6 spots too high because the wins that they were getting early looked a lot better than they do now? And is it time for a little bit of an adjustment? And we're obviously going to see them, to put the little plug in. They're headed to Texas over the break for this tournament that Riley's been a part of, that Trinity is hosting. So we'll get some more examples of that. But just do we think they're really the number 5 team in the country, or is it more like 11, 12?
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing them play in San Antonio. I know when they committed to come to the Classic at Trinity, I think we all knew. I mean, even from last year and watching them go on the tournament run that they did, they were bringing back a lot. They had a lot of strong pieces that played well together. And I think sometimes that's the biggest key, is having a group that plays in a cohesive unit, right? There's so many teams out there that have talent. But the thing about Mary Washington that seemed to stand out, to your point, Ryan, is that they play so well together. It makes them tough to beat. You take away one option and they just find another, whether it be off the bench or in their starting 5. They've got a lot of depth. I do think, though, to your point, it's an interesting conversation to have, because there's certainly a case to be made where, again, some of these results that really boosted their resume in the early weeks of voting have, not quite panned out the same way. Rowan certainly has a kind of team I think we thought they would be, and now that really narrow win maybe doesn't look as good when you start to break down kind of from a resume and voting standpoint. So they're definitely an intriguing one. I feel like they're kind of in the top 10 for sure, but top 5 is maybe another conversation. They feel like a team that has certainly started to navigate things and played a really tough schedule, which you have to give them credit for. But at the same time, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle some of these future matchups they get, considering what we've seen so far, and maybe some questions about some of the teams that they've beaten to this point.
For me,
well, it's what I'm looking forward to. I was looking forward to that. They're playing St. Thomas down at the Leslie Robinson there. And they're 2 teams that on paper, like you look at the sizes and the positions, they're very, very similar, but they basically are opposite styles, right? Like the thing I would say, Mary Washington is smooth. They play smooth basketball. They're moving the ball a lot. And I feel like St. Thomas is just trying to throw a wrench into your engine when they play. Like, yep. And just to see those go up against each other, it's going to be a great barometer for both teams, I think, to see how they're doing.
I put it down to, it's a Marcus Kahn team. And yep. I just never, I've actually been waiting for this team. Does that make sense? Like, I've been waiting for this unit. Are they flying a little high? Yeah, probably. I've got them 10, but I had them higher at one point. I did kind of a check on them. Marcus Kahn's teams are always fundamentally really good. Remember Cabrini, when they were really good, they were a very solid team outside of their stars. But this, I would agree, the trip to Texas is a tremendous opportunity. Even again, like I said earlier, even in a loss, it's a good opportunity. I like it.
Well, and they just seem to be stepping up to every challenge, right? When we're coming into the GLI, we were like, well, they're not big enough, right? They're going to play Carthage with Ryan Johnson in there, and then they went and out rebounded them, and dominated them on the boards, and it just seems like every game you say, well, they might not be able to do this, and then they just do it. Well, they've been meeting every challenge. That's why I said I don't mind voting them so high, but it doesn't there's nothing about them that looks like a team that should be in the top 5.
Well,
but,
right.
You
I
know,
mean,
they're
listen,
playing
a
that
double
way for sure.
overtime win over Yeshiva, a night after Yeshiva got absolutely trounced and rolled over and torn apart by Randolph Macon. Prior to that, an overtime win over Rowan. Yeah, I mean, there's some of those where you look at it and you're like, 4-point win over Guilford. That's not a top 5 team in my book. But as you said, then they go out there and they thrash somebody and you're like, oh, okay. So again, they've got St. Thomas coming up in San Antonio, then Shriner. Not sure we'll learn much. What we'll learn from Shriner is if they can recover from the game from St. Thomas. But then they've got Virginia Wesleyan at the end of the month, Catholic on the 3rd, and Circle the 4th and 7th, Christopher Newport, then Macon, then Christopher Newport again on the 14th of February. So they've got some good games ahead of them, but we're just going to have to be patient and wait and watch them. They might float a little high on that top 25.
I should put the plug out there for any coaches watching. Marcus Kahn will play anybody, anywhere, anytime.
Absolutely.
And he really wants to schedule you. So if you want to bring your team to DC, come play them. If you invite them out, you know, they'll find some money and fly out to some crazy place to play you. Like they really want to play the best teams all the time, and they don't have a conference schedule. So he's always talking about this. I'll put the plug in for schedule Barry
it's
Washington.
a good point.
They'll come.
Absolutely tremendously good point. Any final thoughts on men, gentlemen?
Just excited for this next couple of weeks and all these tournaments in different places and the matchups we're going to get. There are just so many good games over the holidays. Make sure you don't forget to watch.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that point. I was going to say something similar. I mean, this is, you know, one of the best times of the year outside of March and kind of that the late February time frame. I feel like we learned so much about so many different teams at this point in the year because so many of them are getting to different regions, playing different styles. We're seeing some really unique matchups, and it's a fun part of this kind of late December time frame in the annual D3 Hoops calendar.
Yep, absolutely agree. Do you guys need a break, or you want to go right into women?
It's up to you, man.
I'm good. I'm ready to fly. I'm ready to roll and see what we can do with things. I'm gonna be fancy because while you guys are all talking, I made sure that we decided to upgrade the look of the show. And so there we go. We got new graphics up. Oh, they didn't line up perfectly. I'll work on that. But it still looks nicer than what we had going, and I switched camera shots. All right, let's talk women's basketball. This is obviously, we haven't heard from Riley in a few weeks on this topic, so I'm looking forward to getting his take on it all. Same deal. We go through the regimen of dubious, deep dive, and debatable. But first, I want your take. Riley, we have not heard from you in a bit on the women's side of things. I'm curious how you think the last few weeks have gone.
Yeah, there's been a lot since last time we talked on here. Because, you know, it feels like with some of these teams on the women's side, it's been an interesting season. I think there's been a clear group kind of in the top tier that you felt good, you know, penciling every week into your ballot, really haven't given you much cause for concern. But after that, we've had a ton of really interesting matchups that have kind of played out. I think, you know, we certainly had a couple weeks ago where Bates, Bowdoin, Colby all played as they do every December. And I think we saw some really good matchups there, learned some really good things about those three teams. You know, another out in the Midwest, we've seen Calvin playing some interesting matchups, beat Whitewater. Chicago then beats Calvin. It's kind of been that sort of a season so far on the women's side, where maybe not in such, you know, as large of a quantity as we've seen it on the men's side, but there's been a lot of interesting dynamics with the women's poll when you kind of start to try to look at that 15 to 25 every week. It's been difficult to kind of nail down a group that you would normally, you know, in previous years, you could feel pretty good about that 15 to 25 group. It's not really been the case, at least from my perspective, for most of this season.
Ryan, thoughts?
Well, so the thing that's been interesting, I think this is my 4th year voting in the women's poll. And, you know, you have to get a feel for, it's a different culture just because they're playing basketball. That you have to learn to do this differently. And the way that I always approach my men's poll, especially at this time of year and earlier, is I generally don't rank a team unless they've had a big win, right? Like just because you're undefeated doesn't mean I'm going to give you much. And you really couldn't do that for the women until this year. Like this is the first year that I've been able to go look and have enough teams with statement wins before Christmas. Because, and I call this the NPI knock-on effect, right? They're all scheduling better because they see what NPI does and the impact. And so you've got a lot more teams that are playing tougher schedules and getting those big wins. And I was just really happy that I was able to go through this last week and just write a few teams off that I think are good that just haven't played the kind of schedule they need to yet, and feel okay about it. Because in previous years, you'd have to work them into the poll anyway because there weren't other options. And just the depth and the quality of the scheduling, I do think is a direct result of getting NPI now.
Well, and I find it interesting because, as I said at the beginning, and this is now several weeks in a row, we have more teams that voters on the women's side are voting for than there are on the men's side. I can't remember the last time that's happened where it's happened over more than a week or more than at the beginning of the season in the preseason poll. We're seeing several weeks in a row now where there's 26 women's teams receiving votes on top of the 25 who are in the poll. The men's shrunk this week. I think the women's went up. So clearly there's more interest in who's in there and who they're playing. And there's more teams who are willing to go out there and play tough opponents at the beginning as you're talking about. And that gives us more significant games. Now, there's some coaches who won't. If anybody heard the conversation I had with Bill Broderick today, you will hear Bill kind of break the coals with some teams about not playing them. We heard it from Smith. We've heard it from some other schools. So I do find some schools are willing to go out there and play, but maybe not the way they should be. But the point is we're still getting better games. And so we're seeing better content and better. And maybe this is why we get better opportunities for these conversations. Like these aren't as interesting. There's one other one. I'm going to save it for the end because I'm curious where these guys go with a couple of these conversations on teams, who their picks are. Because there's one that I'm fascinated by, if anybody knows the top 25 today, but I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for now. What we are going to do is go to dubious. And Riley, this is more your wheelhouse. And so we get to start with you. Who is your dubious choice on the women's side of things, sir?
Yeah, well, I'll just start by saying that, in a way, the women's poll has been interesting because we have so many of those resumes that you talked about where teams have maybe a quality win, but maybe a loss that kind of pulls them back, that I don't know that I have a team that I look at and I say they absolutely should not be there, right? I think there's a case to be made, a very good case for every team that's ranked right now that I can absolutely see. I will say the one team that I have that's ranked high in the top 20 that I don't have on my ballot is Trinity of Connecticut. So I'm going to go with them as my dubious to talk just a little bit about this and why they're not ranked in my ballot. Similar to what Ryan talked about kind of wanting to see a big win or a quality win from a team. I've had a similar approach with kind of trying to grade these teams. Obviously, there's some caveats in there, but Trinity doesn't yet have a win that you can really point to and say, okay, this is where they're 8-1, and this is absolutely what it's built on. Now, what they do have is they played Smith really close. And I think for a while, that was kind of what I was pointing to as what stood out to me, right? As far as Trinity went and their body of work. But to this point, as other teams have started to put together better results, they don't have a win over a team in the Massey top 100 right now. The Springfield win is pretty solid. They've had some solid performances within this starting stretch. But at this point, they're currently, further down in efficiency than I would like to see. I think they're 44th in efficiency margin, and they've done it against a more middle of the pack kind of schedule. So they're a great rebounding team. I think there's a lot of positives with them. I can absolutely see where they're 17th. But for me, I just want to see a little bit more from them to kind of get a feel for where they're at. Again, Olivia Vick not playing for them this year has changed a lot as far as the way I viewed them compared to the preseason. So that's also a part of this. Teams will deal with injuries along the way, and you kind of have to navigate that part of it. But certainly I think they've done a good job playing without her. It's just as other teams have started to pile up their own results, Trinity's resume hasn't really jumped off the page like it did maybe a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and they an 11-point loss to Smith in that mix. Ryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, Olivia not being there is obviously a big deal. I had them pretty high in the preseason poll, and then with her not being there, was very nervous. And then I felt like some of those early games they played really well. Watching them, eye test wise, seemed like they had a better handle on it than I expected, given the absence. And those teams aren't terrible. Like you said, they're not top 100 teams where maybe we thought a few of them might be. TCNJ, Brockport, Skidmore, even Westcon, like they're not bad teams, and maybe they're a little lower in the efficiency than we might have expected, but I still think they're teams that are going to give you a challenge, and that's kind of why I've kept them up. Just because, and the Smith does help. I mean, it's one of those weird things when you have 5 or 6 teams that are just so much better than everybody else. An 11-point loss to Smith is actually like a decent result for the 15th best team in the country. And so that can almost stand in for a win because of how well they played there. But and again, with an SCAC team, you kind of know once they get into conference play, they're either going up or down based on their own merits. So you don't feel as bad, if it's maybe a team from a smaller conference where they're likely to run through it, whether they're really good or not. You might be a little more cautious, but with a power conference team, I'm a little more apt to put them higher if I think they're good, because I know I'll be shamed or proven wrong pretty easily as the season goes along.
By the way, TCNJ was picked to win the conference in the NJAC, and they're 2-3-7 right now. Just the dynamics are 3-7, 3-2 in conference play. They started the season with 6 straight losses. They have won 3 of the last 4. But to your point, there's this crazy dynamic to read Trinity, Connecticut into. Yeah, interesting choice. I don't. What, new coach?
That's
too,
one of those
right?
teams, TCNJ, that's scheduled for what we thought they would be, and then they're just like a titch below that, and it really cost them.
Right. Dubious for you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to hit it too hard because I think somebody brought them up in this category 2 weeks ago. But what struck me as I was looking at this is that you can go all the way down like the top 20 teams maybe. And I kind of just was like, yeah, those that all seems great. Right. And so the first team I got to that was like, oh, maybe they're 5 spots too high, right, is Elizabethtown. And this is another one of those, I think, like Trinity that we talked about, that you watch them play and they're fine. Maybe the results are not quite what you want them to be yet, but they're also going to play Catholic and Scranton a whole bunch of times. And so we know we're going to know what they are by the end of the year. And so I suspect some voters have them a little higher because of that exact reason that I had Trinity higher. And so I can't fault it so much, but I'm a little dubious of some of the results they've had so far. I feel like some of those games have been too close for a team that's ranked where they are, but obviously they're good and you watch them play, and I think they'll be good. And we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, Messiah is not as strong as they have been, right? Like Messiah is not the behemoth that they usually are, especially early in the year. 2-point loss to Shenandoah at least bolted Shenandoah into the top 25 for the first time in program history. But yeah, I agree with you. Riley, your take on E-Town?
Yeah, E-Town, we kind of knew graduating. I've actually been impressed, and I completely get the context of what Ryan's saying. I've been impressed, though. I didn't expect I would be voting for them, at least not at this point, with all of whom they graduated after last year's team. They haven't really been in as much of a rebuilding year as you might have thought. They've had players step up, which has been good to see. At the same time, the narrow results early on, I think, they played so many close games to start the year. Just about every game was kind of down to the wire, 3-point game, overtime game. That included, the opener against Rowan, the Haverford win in double overtime, which they scored, over 100. Both teams went over 100 in that one. So there's certainly been some of these results where you'd expect that a top 25 team might win by more. I will say that the Shenandoah result on Sunday, with all due credit to Shenandoah, Cameron Engel was not playing for E-Town on Sunday. She was out. That's their third leading scorer, if memory serves. if she even has half her average, they win that game, right? If you just include her production. So I do think, the injuries play into that. It's part of the reason why I didn't drop E-Town too far. I dropped them one spot this week. But they also understand, yes, when you have a team that's played that many close games that could have gone either way, it certainly raises your eyebrow a little bit to say, hold on a second, maybe we need to consider where we're putting them here within the poll. Not necessarily whether they're in or out, but where do they stack up here, especially towards the bottom of the ballot, which is such a hard group right now on the women's side to put together every week.
Veronica, no, Nolt usually puts together a good team. They've got to wait a week here to play Dickinson. Then they'll wait 10 days to play Acadia. Then they get back into conference play against Ursinus. You were talking about statistically what they were missing in that game. What Mengel brings in? Well, she's missed a few games. She's missed 2 now. And she's got, well, I mean, not only the 13 points a game, but shoots 41% from the floor and 84% from the free throw line. She's not a big loss on rebounds necessarily, but steals and defense. So yeah, I mean, that's a factor certainly, in that sense. So it's a good point. All right. Deep dive, Ryan, who should be flying higher in this group? And it's tough because there's a lot of women's teams getting votes.
Yeah. So I tried to stick with what I said for the men and go with the highest team on my list who's not getting votes. And I had to go, I had to go to 36 on my list to get to a team that wasn't getting votes. And that's Rhode Island College for me. And obviously like at 36, that's pretty far down. This is not the Rhode Island College team that was sort of a Final Four contender a couple years ago. They're having to work their way back, but they've still got a lot of that culture there. And this is one of those teams. So they have a loss at Brandeis, who's a pretty good team, and that they lost at home to Tufts, who we know is a pretty good team. But this is one of those schools that's playing. They don't have a lot of cupcakes on the schedule, right? They maybe not be playing world beaters, but they've got Western New England, TCNJ, as we talked about, Johnson and Wales, MIT, UMass Dartmouth. Obviously, they've started off 3-0 in Little East there. And I think it's a tough team, right? Defense is always going to be a really high priority there. And these teams that can go through a gauntlet like that is maybe not world-beating teams, but that you're winning every week against good competition is someone I want to watch, right? Like I said, they're 35th on my list. I had to go that far down to get to one nobody was voting for, but I think it's a team to watch for sure.
Riley.
Yeah, I think Rhode Island College, certainly. I mean, I think you can always kind of count on the fact that they're going to put a good team on the floor. They're well coached. Jenna Cosgrove does a great job there. And again, I think early on in this season, I've seen, some really positive things from them. Even again, kind of the point that Ryan made about Trinity and playing Smith. I think Tufts is really good. And Rhode Island College really, I thought, played Tufts well in that game. I think it just is a good, measuring stick for them early on this season. The MIT win, as close as that was, 58-57, that's a solid result. Again, MIT, I think, is better this year. I think they're a team that's gonna be one to watch as we go along. So I think Rhode Island College has certainly put together some really nice results to start this year, and they seem like a group that's only going to continue to get better as they start to kind of incorporate their bench a little bit more, and some of these newer pieces, kind of start to find their way into the rotation. Because again, I mean, this Little East Conference always seems like it comes down to Rhode Island College or Mass Dartmouth in the end. And I certainly think this year may be very similar along those lines.
Sorry, Ryan, your thoughts on that? I thought I had a thought. I didn't. I lost it. Ryan,
we stumped you. I went far enough down that we've stumped you from.
You did.
I don't think Dave's watched a lot of Rhode Island College yet this year. So
I thought I had a thought on. I don't have a thought. Thought I did. I know we talked about them. We're so used to them being a juggernaut, right? That I think I'm more interested this year in what's going on than not.
Well, and I think losing to Brandeis early knocked them off of a lot of people's radar. And then I think Brandeis has turned out to be a little bit better than people expected them to be.
Sure.
So that doesn't look quite so bad as you've gone along. And Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not voting for them. Nobody is, but it's
But to
certainly a
make
team
Scott
keep an eye on.
Peterson feel better, by the way, Brandeis has not gotten into UAA play. Sorry, inside joke. Riley, your pick.
Yeah, Dave, there's a few different directions I can go here.
Yeah.
A couple teams I have written down, right? One that I want to bring up really quickly, I think is UW Eau Claire. I know they're getting some votes there at the bottom, but I don't think
You and Eau Claire today.
I know. Eau Claire was a team that honestly, part of this is the relevancy with being Gustavus Adolphus on Saturday. I thought I would bring them up. I also have Brandeis on my list, just for the record. They're a team that's pretty interesting. They actually, they beat Rhode Island College by 11, as Ryan mentioned, and played Tufts really close, 9-1 right now. So Brandeis certainly playing well. But to get back to Eau Claire, I think Eau Claire this year feels like the best version of Eau Claire we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. They kind of took a dip there for a little while. And, watching them, I had the chance to watch them a few different times. You start to look at their resume. And again, I'm not voting for them. They're kind of far down in that receiving votes category. But, at 8-1, they've beaten St. Benedict. They've beaten St. Scholastica, who right now is St. Scholastica playing really, really well. They're actually, leading the MIAC standings so far, which is not something I had on my bingo card when this season started. They've put together some really nice results. And, Kyla Oversky is, averaging right around 20 points a game. She's a key catalyst. They've found some freshmen and sophomores who have stepped into those roles, especially in the post that they didn't have the last couple of years. And it feels like this team has kind of started to come together in a way that really stands out at this early juncture of the season. Again, we're not in the conference play. That's going to be the real test. It always is. But playing a relatively tough, non-conference schedule, playing a team like St. Norbert, Simpson, a lot of these teams, obviously the Gustavus win, as I mentioned, beating them by 15 on Saturday, even with Gustavus not quite, being quite as strong as they've been in previous years. I think this Eau Claire team is one to take seriously and one that we could be talking about as the top 35 team here, a few weeks down the road once we get into January.
I've got an Eau Claire pullover I usually wear, Riley. Do you want me to send it to you?
Yeah.
I kid. You raise good points as
I
always.
don't know if you guys are the same size.
No, I don't think so. If he is, then I have lost more weight than I realized. Ryan, your thoughts on Eau Claire?
Yeah, so that was another surprise to me as I was looking down through the ballot. We obviously have Oshkosh and Whitewater that are really high up there. Stevens Point is undefeated, but as I was looking through and comparing those resumes, like I was more confident in Eau Claire than I was in Stevens Point, just in terms of what they've done so far through the season. And then I got to watch, not a lot, maybe 4 or 5 minutes of the game against Gustavus, and they just seemed like a really solid team. I kind of felt this way at this point last year as well. And I don't know that they went through conference play at the same level that they played the non-conference. So that'll be kind of the big question for me, but certainly a team to be watching as we go to WIAC play.
Yep. Once again, the WIAC is going to be a gauntlet on the men's and women's side. I think Oshkosh is just stunningly good. But I'm looking forward to seeing how Whitewater evolves. I think Stevens Point's coming back into the conversation. I don't mind seeing Eau Claire back in that convo either. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, good deep dives, gentlemen. I think we're good with that. So now we got the debatable, ripping off an idea of who you want to debate. I've got one, by the way, for this category. I'm going to throw one out there, but I want you guys to start with this, Ryan.
All right, so I want to debate the number one team in the country, NYU.
There it is. Go ahead and tell people why.
I started the preseason voting for Scranton in my preseason poll. NYU came out of the gate with that offense chugging along and looking like they have not missed a beat despite all the graduations they've had over the last 2 seasons. But this week I switched back from NYU back to Scranton simply because of the schedule. Like the Scranton is putting up these performances that are just as impressive as what NYU is doing. And they're doing it against tougher competition at this point. And maybe, Meg Barber's team will once they get into UAA play, just prove that it doesn't matter how good the team they're playing is. They just dominate them, and I'll have to switch back again. But I feel like I want to reward Scranton at this point for what they have done so far, and not just automatically give it to NYU because they've won. What are we up to? 70 now, or almost 70 games in a row? So, and obviously they're 1 or 2 in my book. Like that's the only debate that we have. But I are they as good as they look just because they have been that good the last 2 years?
I think they're at 72. Quick note. I notice you're pulling the plug. In the first game, they didn't score 100, and I'm giving SUNY New Paltz the game credit because it was 99. They scored 90 against the 7-3 Brooklyn squad. I now see you pulled the plug. So they didn't score enough points is what you're trying to say, Ryan. And so you've decided they aren't the number 1 team in the country. I see how this is.
It's just hard when you put those resumes together and what the results look like. And man, it's real tough to just keep saying, and this is a credit to Scranton, right? This is nothing against NYU. It's how good the Scranton team has looked. And they deserve, at least in my opinion this week, to get that credit with the number 1 vote.
Do you hear that? I hear Meg Barber clipping this segment for the locker room. That's what I hear. I think this is going to get posted on the wall. Riley, your thoughts on the idea that the man has switched the number 1 vote from NYU to Scranton? I get the argument, but I'm curious your take on this.
Well, I mean, Dave, the last time I was on here, I was arguing for Scranton over NYU.
You were.
So, I completely get where Ryan's coming from. Kind of interesting, though. I'm now one of the NYU first place voters. So seeing it from a little bit of a different perspective. I completely think Scranton, I got to give them a lot of credit, right? Scranton has gone out, they played tough teams, and they've won those games. What I will say is that, if I'm just looking at Scranton for a second real quick, I mean, the Cortland win, as good as it looked early on, it doesn't look as good right now. Cortland hasn't been what I expect them to be. Still a really good team, still, great matchup and a great result. But, if Scranton had, a couple top 10 wins right now, and we were talking about that, it might be a little bit of a different conversation. I think Scranton has done really, really well with the schedule they played. I think they're going to be the team that if anyone's able to beat NYU and keep up with NYU pace-wise, it's going to be Scranton. The thing about NYU watching them play, though, it's that pace. They play at the 12th fastest tempo in the country right now, and they're doing it as the number 2 most efficient offense in the country behind Scranton. They're that amount of poise and ability to navigate that, to play as fast as they do and still be able to be controlled enough to not just be throwing up shots and missing a lot of shots. I mean, they shoot for a super high percentage as a team. I believe they're shooting over 50%. And again, I get that the schedule plays into that and playing weaker teams. I get all of that. But to me, I mean, there's only, if you look at the top 50 and you start to break down the top 50 teams in tempo, how many are in the top 50 in efficiencies? There's only one other. That's Christopher Newport. So I think it just puts in perspective how many of these teams, NYU's ability to do that is going to run a lot of teams down very quickly. And, again, from a strength of schedule standpoint, I'll just add, again, that's not something we can decide as voters. I think the MPI has certainly made some teams a little more hesitant to schedule NYU because it really isn't going to help you unless you pull off, the biggest upset of the season kind of thing. There's cases where it might help a team, right? But for these purposes, it's not going to help a ton. So I think that plays into it with NYU's strength of schedule. But if I get back to just kind of looking at the breakdown for them, super efficient team. Caroline Pepper is in my opinion, National Player of the Year candidate with what she's done. They have so much depth. The depth is always going to be, an advantage. And the talent that they have, it's just visible when you sit down and watch them play, even against teams that are not going to be up to the same standard that they're going to see in UAA play. But, we'll see what happens. I mean, they're going to play a really tough group of teams in the UAA. They'll play Emory twice. They'll play, Carnegie Mellon. They'll play, certainly play Brandeis. There's going to play a lot of good teams that are going to push them and give us some better indications of where they're at. But for now, I just watching them on film, NYU looks to me very much like a team that is going to go out and beat just about everyone in their path. I just don't see them losing at this point. And even beyond that, they're just doing a lot of things, the little things that are going to add up in the end that we've kind of come to expect from Meg Barber's team.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with NYU.
Yeah. And so the one thing that I want to know, and the crazy thing is we may not even get a chance until like the second or third weekend in the tournament, is what happens to NYU when they have a team they can't turn over the way that they do everybody else. But I'm just not sure that team exists outside of maybe Scranton, right? Like even a lot of those UAA teams that are really good don't have the same guard play, right? They're going to win for other reasons if they can beat NYU, and it's not that guard. I just don't know how many teams out there I would even like give much of a chance against NYU, and Scranton is kind of one of them, and I'm going to reward that at the moment.
January 11th, buddy. Scranton's going to be at the Palestra. You could always go check them out near you. This was the one I was hoping might come up. Moving the vote off NYU to Scranton. Listen, I get the argument. I don't know if I'd have the guts to do it. I've moved my number one around for different reasons. People know it. I've left it with a team that's lost. Yeah, interesting. Love it. That's why it's debatable. Riley, you're debatable. And is it as juicy and as good as that one?
I don't think anything can top that one there.
No.
But I do want to talk about Denison for a second, because it is interesting. This is a team that Ryan is not voting for, but I am. I have them 19th. I just think they're an interesting team to look at, because we were talking a little while ago about some of these teams that are undefeated early on in the year, but you're kind of trying to figure out the quality of results. And they're 9-0 right now. I think the result you point to is the DePaul win that they picked up. It's a really solid road win. But DePaul is not quite at the level that they have been years past. They're sub 500 right now, even though they're still pretty high in Massey ratings and other kind of metrics. They haven't had the wins that we've come to expect from DePaul. So how you grade that win, I think, plays into how you grade Denison. But watching Denison play this year, I've been really, really impressed with this group. They have a lot of juniors that have been playing together for a couple of years. And it feels like after the last few seasons of starting to move in this direction, they really have taken a huge step forward this year. And quite honestly, when I saw the NCAC preseason coaches poll, now I think the coaches were a little bit off with John Carroll being third, but Denison was number 2 up there, and kind of got my attention and started watching them play from the beginning. They had a couple of close results against Transylvania and Franklin when they weren't able to turn them over. The teams they've been able to turn over, they've kind of run away with those wins. So I think defensively they're a very solid team. But they're an interesting one, because again, 9-0, but it depends on how you kind of value the resume to this point.
Ryan, your thoughts?
Well, and that's kind of my hesitancy. I moved them up. I think they got them 28th maybe on my listing of teams this week. So like they're right in the mix there. But it is that sort of thing. So you look at what the close games are: Transylvania, Franklin, DePaul, who are all, I think tough teams to play and beat, but maybe not in that top world beating sort of class yet. And it's the one thing I'm learning doing this women's poll, is that there are some teams that the top teams can beat by 50 on a given night. That doesn't usually happen on the men's side. Like a blowout is more like a 30-point game. And so I'm learning the tiers, right? If you're beating a team by 50, what quality is that in versus 20 versus that kind of thing. And some of those close wins, maybe if it's a team I'm voting for, I want them to be a little higher. But then this is also the problem we have with 450 teams. I haven't watched them, right? So you talked about seeing them play and the way that they're playing, and that eye test really is helpful as a voter. And I'm hoping to get a chance to do that with Denison, especially as they're jumping into my radar now. But that's just one. I haven't looked at them, so I'm really just going on the resume at this point. And without one of those big, strong wins, I wasn't quite confident to get them in yet.
I think to get this point at 9-0, you got to be good. I understand schedules can be schedules, right? But you've got to have something going if you're going to be at this point at 9-0, because that means you've gotten through a third of the season, right? And anybody who's now playing you knows you're good. There's no surprises anymore. So I mean, hats off to him. I don't see. I think if you're voting for him in the top 25, I'm not faulting you for it. Yeah, maybe not a lot of challenges ahead of him or so far. Otterbein 6-2 coming up.
Otterbein pretty good. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Albright's 3-5, and then you get into conference play. Ohio Wesleyan is a darn good team. Wittenberg looks like they might be. John Carroll. I mean, you're going to get tested, right, Riley? Dennison's going to get tested. We'll see what Marine Hurt's got up her sleeve, but I kind of dig it. I don't blame you for voting for him. Can I throw one at you guys?
Go for it.
Your show.
This does not have to get taken off the table. So if someone wants to bring them up at a later date for a category, they can. McDaniel. 10th win pre-January 1st for the first time in program history. Their opponents are 43-50, and they're 4-1 against teams that are better than 500. Not 500, but better than 500. Their one loss was to Dickinson by 2. Granted, at home. They just thumped Stockton today, 63-48. They'll play Salisbury on the 7th, and they get into conference play on the 10th. Dickinson again on the 14th. They got Hopkins coming up on the 21st of January, and then Gettysburg on the 28th. So they're going to have a gauntlet later in January. But, I mean, Elena Beckett is a darn good forward. They've got little pieces on this team, and I've always enjoyed what Kristen Gowan can do as a coach. She just hasn't had the pieces yet, and even when she's had the pieces, they'll lose a piece, which has been unfortunate. They might have something going this year. I mean, 10-1, not bad. I mean, yeah, there's some teams that they play that are not worldly. Again, they're 4-1 against above 500 teams, and their opponents are 43-50 overall. I'm not saying they definitely need to be a top 25 team, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, they've been a team. I had the opportunity to talk with Coach Gallen early in the year, kind of for a feature that I did on teams that were kind of turning things around, or on kind of really obvious upward trajectories after being kind of going through some struggles in the last 3-4 years. And McDaniel is a great example of a team that has put together some really strong recruiting classes back to back to back. We're starting to see that kind of come together. And Elena Beckett certainly, averaging 22 points a game, over 8 rebounds a game. Like, what she brings to the table is incredible. They've got great guard play, really strong in the backcourt. I mean, the Dickinson result was kind of the one that has prevented me from putting them in, but they're certainly on my watch list. I mean, they have been since the very beginning. I think they're very good. And they're going to be an interesting team to watch in this conference because they're absolutely capable of challenging Hopkins, I think. Again, when you have a team that doesn't turn it over very often, which they have the ability to do because of the way that their guards play and move the ball, they can beat a lot of teams, especially teams that, aren't going to, Hopkins is certainly capable of scoring a lot, but those are the types of games where they get into some more defensive battles. And, McDaniel has proven they can win some of those types of games. So I certainly think they're on the right track. They're going to be one to watch for sure.
Any thoughts, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we need Scott, right? He's been the big McDaniel fan the whole year so far. And
this is why I'm saying we don't have to pull this off the list. Scott can bring this back if he wants to.
Well, and I think you'll want to bring it back once they've had a few more Centennial games under their belt, right? Because it seems like they're getting the sorts of results in the non-conference that you want a team like this that's on the rise to have, right? Like, these are pretty sizable wins. And, other than that Ursinus game, which is one of the early conference games, so it's a little easier to say, oh, that's closer than maybe you would have wanted it to be. That's the kind of game that gets closer than you want it to be, right? It's an early season conference game. And a lot of the other results are what you want to see. The other thing, as we said, is haven't had like that real big competition yet, right? And if the Dickinson result means that these are similar teams, that's not quite top 25 yet, and they need to kind of prove that going forward. They're certainly capable, as Riley said, but we gotta see it.
Dickinson, Abby Diop teams will muck things up. They will make it ugly. They will make it a grind. If you rise above it, you will win easy. If you struggle with it, if you turn the ball over, you play into Dickinson's hands and you get a game like you saw there. But they're still outscoring their opponents by 21.5 points a game. Beckett, I've always enjoyed watching Beckett play, as I said. The fact that she's scoring 21 points a game right now or 22 points a game is amazing, because I didn't see 22 points a game. I was waiting for her to break out, and she's finally doing it. Unfortunately, it's her senior year. Not that she had bad years prior to this. Do not get me wrong. She's had very good years, but to compare, 14.3 her freshman year, 12.4 her sophomore year, 15.6 her junior year, now 22 points a game. She's also handing out 3.5 assists per game, while dishing out or grabbing 8 boards per contest. Like, Beckett's having a season. She's shooting 56%. Wow. Beckett's having a better year than I realized. I just went and dove into those stats. She's having a better year. And granted, we're 11 games in. We'll see what happens when when Hopkins and Gettysburg show up. And they got to play Dickinson a second time at Dickinson, by the way. So we'll see how it plays out. I just want, they came up on my radar. I mean, they're always on my radar, but because of proximity, but a couple other things popped up for me today. And then Scott made a comment. I'm like, oh my God, he's like in my head. So I was curious your take. So I appreciate it. Any final thoughts on the women, gentlemen?
I'm looking forward to more good games over the holidays as well. I'm getting the chance to travel out to see family in Colorado, and I'm going to get to see, of all things, Hardin Simmons play Wartburg in Colorado on Friday.
That's cool.
So I'm actually really looking to that one. One of the ones I wanted to do as a deep dive was Hardin Simmons, but a couple of people voted for them, so I decided to drop my list down. I'm really looking forward to see that team. I think they're kind of a surprise out there, and hope to get to see a whole bunch more great games, just like the men over the holidays.
Riley, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to be in for a really good one. I mean, it's always interesting. We get teams going to play at altitude. You never know how that's going to play out. I mean, we didn't even mention this, but St. Thomas, Texas men went to overtime against Colorado College, and that's part of the SCAC, right? You play at altitude, and you never know how teams handle that. But yeah, so I think that'll be really interesting. Hardin Simmons has certainly impressed me. They always put a good team on the floor. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm just looking forward to more good games too. We got Illinois Wesleyan, Chicago women playing tomorrow. That kind of continues what should be a big week of games. So a lot to keep up with, a lot to be looking forward to in the next week ahead.
Well, good point on the Chicago game. This segment the show went much longer than usual, guys, but I appreciate your time. Great insight. This is it. We won't see anybody until January 5th when it talks top 25. So thank you for your time. Happy holidays. You guys enjoy it. I know you will with the games at the very least. And we'll look forward to catching up with you in January when we dive back into these ballots, which I'm sure are going to look very different in 3 weeks. But you guys enjoy your holidays. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Riley Zayas. Ryan Scott, join us on the Hoopsville Hotline, talking top 25. So there you go. If you were watching us live, thank you so much. If you're watching us on demand and you haven't become part of the Hoopsville membership, what is wrong? Let's go. Help us out. Help us become part of a bigger program. And by the way, we got some extra things coming to buy me a coffee. We're going to add some other little flares there, maybe a chance to chat with me and others on a Zoom call and whatnot. So jump on board. buymeacoffee.com/Hoopsville. If you're watching us live, thank you so much. If you're watching the archive, appreciate that as well. If you're watching the archive and you haven't been a member of this Hoopsville membership, then do that. Future shows, we talked about it on the regular show. We may do a show at the end of this week. I'm in the middle of a major project. So Thursday's show is going to get pushed to either Friday or Monday or not at all. I would say if you were looking at a percentage, it's probably about 40% we do it on let's call it 50% we do it on Friday. 35% we do it on Monday. 15% we don't do it at all. But we'll stay with us on our social media channels, and we will give you an update then. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the Top 25 Double Take. Our next show will be January 5th. That will be live here from the Hoopsville studios on January 5th. Once again, thanks so much. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. You've been listening to Hoopsville, the Top 25 Double Take Show, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA studios.